It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Victor Ho. Victor is the co-founder and CEO of Fivestars, a software startup on mission to help businesses and communities thrive by turning every transaction into a relationship. Over 30 million people use Fivestars to get rewarded at over 13,000 local businesses with one rewards program. Prior to Fivestars, Victor worked at McKinsey Company, where he helped build out cutting-edge loyalty and customer engagement strategies for premier Fortune 500 brands. He started his career as an investment banker at Goldman Sachs and holds 3 degrees from the University of California, Berkeley, where he triple majored in industrial engineering, rhetoric, and business administration. Victor and his wife, Jessica, live in San Francisco and attend Reality San Francisco Church. Victor Ho, welcome into the corner office.
Thanks for having me, Brent.
It's great to have you here. And I'm over in sunny Connecticut today, and I think you're on the opposite coast, I believe, in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're having lovely late spring, early summer weather here. What's it like out where you are?
It's usually overcast Daly City, just a sleepy little suburb outside of SF, but today's actually not bad.
Nice. Great. Well, great to connect with you across the continent. We spoke a couple of weeks ago or so and got to know each other a little bit. And I always like to kind of start a little bit with the early days. And, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about, where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
I grew up in Southern California. My parents are both immigrants, really standard sort of Chinese immigrant story where my grandparents had fled from China during the Cultural Revolution as all of that was happening to Taiwan. And then my parents grew up in Taiwan, but sort of immigrated to the US for college and, kind of the standard like 8 siblings living in a 1-bedroom apartment, everyone working 3 jobs to try and put themselves through school and make ends meet type thing.
So did they come over when they're in their teens or 20s? How old were they when they immigrated?
They came over for college, so right at that age.
And at that time. And did they know each other beforehand, or had they met? Well,
my parents, no, they met each other later on. But awesome. learning English by watching like TV and cartoons and stuff type thing.
Right.
And then exactly. I would say my childhood as a part of that was also pretty stereotypical. Grew up in an environment where it really emphasizes a lot of hard work, a decent amount of tiger parenting for those familiar with that stereotype.
Right.
Grew up, I was thinking we were poor and just a paycheck away from not having a meal in front of us, but
destitute,
like a lot of conservativeness around spend and focus on academics, that type of thing.
Yeah. Brothers and sisters?
I have one little sister, 2 years younger.
Little sister. Awesome. Terrific. And what did your mom and dad do? They obviously came over for the university. Did they able to get into, professional jobs quite soon, or did they struggle a bit as they began to get their, foot in the ground here as immigrants?
They got a number of breaks that really went their way. So my dad was an engineer in aerospace. Got a job at Rockwell working on the space shuttle. My mom was
cool.
More of an artist, and they actually met at Rockwell, where she was a drafter, because, believe it or not, it's crazy to think about these days, but back then they'd send rockets to the moon with no computers. everything, all calculations are by hand, and you need
Amazing.
artists to help you draw renderings and sketches and mock-ups of things. And
Wow.
so that's what my mom would do. And that's where they met. And then my dad stayed in aerospace, and then went on to work at Boeing and so forth. And my
Yeah.
mom became a elementary school teacher. She stayed
Wow.
home
Cool.
for a period with us when we were kids, and then went to become a teacher full time.
You talked a little bit about your, stereotypical upbringing. And I lived in Asia for 10 years, lived in Singapore, but traveled in Taiwan, elsewhere, and, saw it firsthand as there as well. What were some of the things that you remember that, the messages or the learnings that dad and mom instilled upon you when you were growing up?
Um, I mean, there's quite a few things. The ones that stand out. One, definitely the importance of faith and the role
Yeah.
of Christ in my life, in our
Mm,
life. I have some very potent memories of
mm,
being extremely cash conscious, worrying that we couldn't afford certain things, but
yeah.
yet when it came time to, when the offering plate gets passed around, um, they're really pushing themselves to a point of discomfort to kind of give, and that was
Mm,
very visceral.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Honesty was another really big thing.
Were your parents believers before they came to the U.S., or did they find Christ while they were here in the U.S.?
It's really my mom, much more
Yeah.
so
Right.
than my dad, where there's still a little bit of a question mark there. But at least on my mom's side of the family, there's a whole epic story of
Mm.
they're taking the last boat out from China. My grandpa gets just this feeling that they gotta get out. He literally had no money on him and sold a ring off his finger to
Oh
buy the
my goodness.
tickets, pulled the family
Wow.
out. They shut the harbor down just after the boat left. And then on that boat, there was a believer sitting next to them who kind of ministered to them. And then when they
Mm.
were in Taiwan, one of their neighbors across the hall started taking them to church, and sort of my whole family kind of got saved through that process.
Fantastic. That's great. I didn't mean to interrupt, but you mentioned honesty was another lesson that mom and dad shared with you growing up.
Yeah, there was definitely, I remember a number of very sort of formative moments where, on
Yeah.
the tiger parenting side, there is a standard like you get like a 95% on a test, and they'll say what happened to the other 5%, right? And then and then
Brutal.
on the other side, a lot of this is self-reported in that I'm coming home from school and they're asking me, what grade did you get? And if I got a bad
Mm.
grade, I'm getting punished. And
Yeah.
and so on the one hand, it's very apparent to me that I could say whatever I want to say, because if I just say I got a good grade, then there's no issue. But then on the other, they've
Right. Right.
impressed such a strong sense of like no matter what, you have to say, you have to tell the truth no matter what. That
Right.
there is
Right.
many of these moments where I'm just telling them that something bad happened or I got a bad result, and that was sort of like viewed as paramount in the family.
And did you have your own moment in coming to Christ, or was it just kind of evolving, given that you were brought up in a Christian home?
Um, I definitely have a testimony in terms of like my coming to Christ moment. It can
Yeah.
get quite long, so I'm trying to think about maybe the high level short version. Um,
Sure.
and basically, it's kind of as follows. The broad strokes are: although I grew up in Sunday school, I was a very rebellious kid, and starting by let's say fifth or sixth grade, when it was became much harder for my parents to control me, I stopped going entirely, and then
Wow.
later on around I stopped going until later on in senior year of high school, and I went with a few friends, simply because they were saying, hey, we're going to church, you want to come? And I just thought, well, sure, I'm Christian, I
Mm.
guess. I always identified even though I didn't really go. And
Right.
I found that um, soon after I would continue going even when they weren't there on my own, and I was kind of
Yeah.
developing
Cool
this relationship. And
relationship.
there's
Yeah.
sort of a long story short of me really realizing that I was very proud, and in order for me to develop a true relationship with Christ, I would need to be humbled. And after 6 months of every day praying for the courage to pray to be humbled, I don't know why I was so certain that it would happen if I asked, and I was petrified to pray it. But one day I kind of just said, all right, fuck it, God humble me. That was literally my prayer in the parking lot of my high school. And promptly my entire life fell apart. I got rejected from every school I applied to. I crashed my car. I had found out this group of friends I thought I was close with, I wasn't. And then through this kind of breaking over a year, just felt God come up alongside me. So real, so visceral, just like sort of a warm, palpable blanket even. And then miraculously after this period, everything just kind of came back together and my life came back together. And I had even forgotten I'd made that prayer until after it all came back together. And there's a lot more to it, but that's the high level.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we know you were a good student in school. That goes without saying. What were the courses that you found the most challenging? Were the ones that you weren't interested in, or were there things that you just said, I can't do this. This is just too tough for me growing up.
I always enjoyed variety. I really liked knowing a little bit about a lot of things. And so I think in college, for instance, I ended up having triple majoring in business, rhetoric, and engineering, just because I
just a few minor courses.
Honestly, I would say that was a really bad decision. When I look back on my education, I think my biggest regrets are more related to just trying to do too much and being too focused on a resume or sort of just checking boxes of accomplishment versus really focusing on a few of the subjects that I was passionate about and, we could just enjoy, versus everything just being work.
What did you do for fun? Were there sports that you engaged with? Did you do theater, music?
Basketball was the biggest, I was one of those kids where from first light to lights out, I'm running around outside, playing sports all day, exploring on my bike, that type of thing.
What about entrepreneurial things? We'll talk a little bit about Fivestars in a minute. I know you've been there almost 11 years and had great success, but was there some entrepreneurial tendencies back in the early days, middle school, elementary school, high school?
Yeah, I think from a pretty early age, I knew that at some point in time, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Yeah, I mean,
were you doing things that were demonstrative of that?
Definitely my personality and behavior was always about breaking the rules and reinventing things and thinking outside the box and, lots of like little projects here and there. But, sort of just, I don't remember when, but just sort of always had that impression of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And were there jobs that you took growing up? What types of, work did you do, or did you have to work while you were in high school and then into college?
I figured out the best way for me to make money was to market some of the strong test scores that I had and be a teacher at an SAT academy or
like a tutor
and stuff like that. And so I did a good amount of that. And then in college, I worked at like a computer repair station on campus, just helping fix broken parts and things like that.
So you went to Berkeley. Obviously, growing up in Southern California, that may not have been the obvious choice. What were your kind of decision-making around that being the school you chose to go to?
Well, I mean, per my earlier comment in terms of my testimony, it was the only one I got into.
Sometimes that's the best choice.
Yeah, it was clearly God leading, but there's a much longer version of the story. But basically, due to my prayer, in spite of perfect test scores across the board and all sorts of stuff, I got rejected from every single school I applied to, including my safety schools. I basically thought my future was over. And in that sort of humbling, I went to a community college for a semester. And then I discovered that California sort of reinstated some budget cuts they had made to the education budget. And as a result, Berkeley could let in more students than they originally accepted. And I literally got an email saying, hey, you've been accepted. Do you want to come? Like not even a letter, And I accepted by filling in this little online form, checking the radio button for Berkeley and clicking accept. And then I went to Cal the next semester.
Was Cal one of your original choices? Was that in your original?
Well, I mean, it was certainly one of the ones I applied to. That's why
right.
I was sort of, I guess, on this secondary wait list that I didn't know about. Yeah.
Awesome. And how'd you go about deciding what to study? As you mentioned, you had three different pursuits there, but I believe you got your BBA, right? In the end, was it a Bachelor of Business Administration?
Well, I have a bachelor's in business administration, in rhetoric, and also a bachelor of science in engineering.
In engineering as well. Got it. Yeah.
Right. And I started with business and rhetoric. Business because I was interested in business, rhetoric because I was thinking about being a lawyer, and that's one of the most popular majors for that at Cal, and liked writing and philosophy and stuff like that. And then engineering. This sounds really bad, but I picked that up at the end of my sophomore year because I felt like I wasn't getting enough math in business and rhetoric, and I really like math. And so I figured if I picked up engineering, I'd get a lot more.
So Victor, what was that first job that you took coming out of Berkeley?
Well, at that point in time, coming out of Berkeley, my goal was basically to make my resume look as good as possible, so I can make be as successful as possible. Right. Fulfill the tiger parent dream, and and so at that point in time, my goal was to go work for a private equity firm. And I thought, okay, if I want to get the top PE hedge fund jobs, the best resume I could have would be to have both investment banking and consulting on my resume. So I interned that summer at Goldman Sachs in IBD, and then after school, I started working at McKinsey in consulting at their New York office.
And was McKinsey kind of top of your list when it came to the consulting side of the business? I mean, obviously, clearly the best, but was that part of your decision making?
Yeah, that was my dream. And I think they hadn't hired anyone full time from Berkeley before. They're sort of annoyingly elitist in that way. And so it was definitely one of these challenges where for myself and another friend of mine at Cal, we were working very hard to be obnoxious, and not really obnoxious, but just get on the radar and try and get a job there.
Sure. Great. Did you have leadership responsibilities there, or were you an individual contributor in your time at McKinsey?
A little bit of both.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, more leadership over time, obviously.
Yeah. Tell us about the first time you started managing people and what kind of conditions and environment that was in.
I'm trying to think if there's anything interesting to say about that. I mean, I would say
or challenges that you might have had doing it.
I mean, the thing they always say at McKinsey is that first time managers either end up micromanaging their people and driving them crazy, or going on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, giving them way too much rope and allowing them to hang themselves. And my personality is definitely the latter. I give people a lot of freedom, maybe too much freedom. But overall, I would say the people at McKinsey, I mean, they're just so competent and self-directed that it's frankly kind of easy. It's very different, I would say, than like managing in a corporate environment.
Any major challenges during those few years you were there in terms of leadership and leadership development?
Not really. I think many more at a startup and running Fivestars, but at McKinsey, I would say there's so much, the support systems and everything are so structured and so well built out that it's really pretty easy.
Well, you're there just a couple of years before you founded Fivestars, so let's talk a little bit about that. Tell us what kind of the motivation was around starting up the business, but maybe just start and tell us a little bit of what Fivestars does. And, those of the audience that don't know about the company, give us your overall mission and core values.
So the mission of the company is the one you mentioned at the beginning, which is to help businesses and communities thrive by turning every transaction into a relationship. The overall idea is that when we look at most small businesses, the reason they struggle today is out of inability to build relationships with their customers. So back in the day, you go to your favorite small business and they recognize you, right? You walk in, you've been in the same place for 20 years. They know not just you and what you like to order, but they know your family and like what's happening with your sister. Um, Aside from that, small businesses are never going to be able to compete with, McDonald's on Lightspeed or Walmart on everyday low prices or Amazon on selection. Like the way a small business survives is really through the strengths of its relationships and the ability to personalize. But today, more and more, they're just being disintermediated. So when you think about, let's say, ordering delivery over DoorDash, what's really happening is now DoorDash is taking that customer away from the small business, and now they become a DoorDash customer, and DoorDash charges the small business owner 30% of every transaction. So these small businesses are losing their customers and then getting taxed to access them. And the same thing is happening all over, right? Like Amazon is, another 17%. Or what is a credit card other than now a bank takes away 3% of revenue off the top from every small business because you are paying with that card. And so you think about a small business where most of them operate off 7% margins, just like tiny razor thin amounts. And every single one of these new things that gets layered on top and disintermediates them from a customer, those taxes quickly add up. And the result is that small businesses today are going out of business at a much higher rate than ever before. What Fivestars does is we help a small business actually be able to gain access to their own customers. So if they want to be able to message one of their customers, they can do so directly. If they want to send an offer to their own their customers, they can do that. They don't have to go through a Groupon or a Yelp or reach their customers through some network that will tax them along the way. Fivestars helps them build that database, and then we have a suite of different products that helps them sort of engage and reward their customers.
That's cool. It's cool. So did the motivation and the insights come out of some of the work that you did at McKinsey, or was this a colleague of yours or a former student at school that you guys came up with the idea from your own experience? Tell us a little bit about the impetus for Fivestars.
Yeah, a big piece of it was the former. At McKinsey, I was doing a lot of this work for Fortune 50 brands. And you think about the largest brands, it's so sophisticated, right? Imagine shopping on Amazon. They know every single thing about you. Every pixel on your Amazon page is personalized offers and recommendations. You have your credit cards on file. You can buy things with one click. And yet, you walk into your typical small business and there's a human in front of you. And yet, you can go somewhere 100 times, but they have no idea who you are. There's no record of what you've ordered. There's no recommendations. You're handing your credit card over and starting every transaction from scratch. And as ridiculous as that sounds, that is the reality. And that is what is causing these small businesses to go out of business at such a large rate, because they just can't compete with the big guys that know instead everything about you and have a lot of sophisticated ways to market to you. So I was doing that for lots of big brands, and just looked at SMBs and saw how much they were struggling, how they're spending tons of money today on systems that are just so old and antiquated and don't work, and wanted to be able to democratize the technology we were building for the big guys, but for the little guy.
Awesome. So you guys went out. Did you bring some of the folks with you? Was it just the two of you for a while as you were getting startup? Tell us about those early days.
Yeah, it was just me and my co-founders in the early days, and then we brought on all the people we could from our network, just calling friends and old acquaintances, and just generally begging people to come join us in our scrappy garage startup.
Awesome. And how many employees today after 10 years, 11 years old?
We have just over 200 employees today.
That's awesome. Great. You've had some venture capital success from what I've gathered, and at that cash flow positive place yet, or still investing in the business as you grow?
The goal is definitely to keep investing in the business. We've raised around 115 million in venture capital today, and we have 65 million consumers, which means that we have
Wow.
roughly 1/5 of the US population signed up on our platform at this point.
So back to the leadership question, what were some of the early challenges as particularly brought in friends and family, which, is a blessing and a curse, right? Sometimes it can be great working with folks, that have that type of background. Other times it can be a bit of a challenge. So tell us a little bit about that.
It's definitely, I would say mostly it's a
Yeah.
benefit. There's obviously a challenge to working with friends and people that are closer to, and that is just kind of more awkward to give hard
Right.
feedback and
Right.
things like that. But overall, when you're a startup and you're not getting paid anything and you're working out of your living room and all sorts of crazy hours, you really need a team of like-minded people who are very devoted to the mission, who are close and invested in
Yeah.
each other, and just kind of one unit fighting together. So it was very valuable and important for us to have a lot of tight knit relationships, and that's something we continue to believe in today. You asked earlier about our company
Yeah.
values, and they are shared
Mm,
humility, authentic relationships, warrior spirit, and joy every day.
nice.
And a lot of that kind of just ties back to the environment we want
How'd
to
you come up
create.
with those core values?
A lot of prayer. There was
Good.
it was kind of a I don't want to overuse the word miraculous, but there was this kind of moment where we came together as a leadership team. We had originally sort of your trite Silicon Valley values, like move fast and break things and take
Yeah.
ownership and
Right.
whatever. And we realized that those aren't really values per se, or not the type of ones that we felt described a culture around the traits we're looking for. And so we had people read a bunch of different books, like the Chick-fil-A story, Eat
Yeah.
More Chicken, or Lead with Love from West Airlines, and so forth. And everyone kind of went away to brainstorm a set of values. And when we came back together, um, people had came back with the same 4 or 5
Mm,
values, and so we wordsmithed it a bit, and it became the 4 values
wow.
that we have now.
That's awesome. I've heard it said, particularly with younger CEOs, that sometimes can be a little uncomfortable having your answers questioned rather than your questions answered. Have you been in that situation? How has that humility played out as you continue to grow the business?
Definitely, but I don't know that I see it the same way.
Hmm.
I think my observation is quite the opposite. That um, when you walk into a situation and you know that you have a lot of things that you don't know, then and you're consistently hiring people who are supposed to be more seasoned and
Right.
experienced in their fields. Um, it's a lot easier to create an environment of debate and
Mm,
dialogue, and so forth, versus my observation is, yeah, and I see a lot less people in this situation taking like a command and control style.
yeah.
I think that sort of command and control style comes more when you kind of think, hey, I know it all, so let
Right.
me just tell everyone what to do.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a very, very bad thing. But I would say when I look at sort of younger founders, um, I don't see them fall into that trap nearly as
Yeah.
often.
Yeah. Awesome. Tell us a little bit about how your leadership styles evolved over the years, because obviously you went through that phase with just you and your co-founder. And then you, of course, brought in friends and family, and now you're, obviously having to hire folks from the outside, and that may or may not be direct references from where they've gone. Have you shifted a bit in terms of how you've managed and developed people over time?
A lot has changed,
Mm,
hopefully improved, as I've learned. I don't know if I have any sort of pithy summary of it, though. I feel like leadership is so nuanced, and
hmm.
for us, we're pursuing this model of servant leadership. But what servant leadership looks like in practice, it has so many facets to it, and there are areas of it I'm good at and have improved at over time, and others that I'm terrible at, and trying to work on, or even struggling to improve on, and it's, yeah, very, very multifaceted. So um, I'm trying to. I don't know if there's any sort of major themes that are worth kind of.
What are the ones you're working on?
So I think the biggest one, if I were to just zoom out and look at my career so far at a 10,000-foot level is that, especially with the startup, it's really easy to intertwine your identity with the success of the company. Meaning to say that when the company is doing good, when doing well, you feel good about yourself. When the company is doing poorly, you feel bad about yourself. You watch these situations where the founder of a company that's failed feels like a personal failure, and you see founders of companies that go public and are worth billions of dollars get a big head and become kind of arrogant assholes, right? And in the day to day of sort of the startup roller coaster, it's exhausting. If in all the up and down, you are personally also going up and down, and it's also just practically bad, pragmatically bad, because when your emotions are oscillating so much, it's very hard to make solid, long-term, focused business decisions. So I would say one of the biggest things I've been trying to work on over the years is making sure that my sense of identity and self-worth is not based in the company itself and the company's success, but rather based on what God says of me, and that I define success the way God defines success, and not just like what TechCrunch says success means.
Right. And how, servant leadership, we touched on that a little bit, and I know that's an important foundation of who Fivestars is trying to be. How does that look like day to day? When do you get challenged on that, or when do you feel like, gosh, I've got to really do something different to be that servant leader?
I feel like that question is a bit broad. I'm trying to think if there's like a specific example.
Well, how does it look like day to day? I mean, are there certain things that you do that, you would feel like, gosh, I'm really, demonstrating that today, or maybe take the reins back from time to time, and perhaps, be a little bit more of that command and control. Do you catch yourself in that, or, do you practice certain things that really make it feel like it's a servant leadership culture?
Well, I don't think servant leadership and command and control are even on different ends of the spectrum. I think they're just unrelated concepts, because the concept of servant leadership is sort of an inverted pyramid, right? Where my team doesn't work for me, I work for them, and my motivation, is not just to like pursue my own self-interest, get rich, make my own resume look better, and while I use these like human resources around me, but rather the opposite, right? Like, I'm trying to pursue a mission. I'm trying to make sure our people are invested in and successful. And so I think servant leadership is really, it stems from like a heart place and condition, when I wake up in the morning, how often am I thinking about and worried about our merchants and our employees, versus about like attaining some goal and making, myself look good in some sort of way.
Results.
And there are many, many ways to do that though, right? Like, someone could have a more directive style and still be coming from that place, versus a much more democratic style. So I don't know that it directly relates to the style of leadership so much as it relates to the intent, and then coming from there.
Yeah.
There's obviously a lot of ways that practically manifests.
Yeah, good point. What would you say is most unusual or unique about the culture at Fivestars that you hear back from the rank and file, so to speak?
For us, I would say it really just comes down to our values, of humility, authenticity, warrior spirit, and joy. We really strive to be a place where the values are real and deeply integrated, and versus just being lip service, or conceptual. So for us, we bake our values into the way we hire, and they're on candidate scorecards. We bake them into performance reviews. And for us, it's someone can't just get away with being a really strong performer. They really need to behave in a way that is humble and authentic, and so forth. And related to those concepts, there's a lot of sub concepts, like really never gossiping. If you ever talk about someone, behind their back, you should talk about them the exact same way as if it was to their face, right? Use the same words, use the same tone of voice.
Yeah.
If you have a conflict with someone, always give them the direct feedback, work it out. Don't just sort of walk away or let something simmer. And there's a lot of pieces to this. And so it's in our 360 performance reviews. We want to make sure it's viewed as just as important as someone's work performance. It shows up in a variety of other ways, like, internal rewards and town hall celebrations and stuff like that. I think those four values really encapsulate the type of culture we're trying to create.
Do you do regular annual performance reviews up and down the organization? Are they more frequent, less frequent?
We do twice a year, 360 reviews.
Twice a year. Yeah, awesome, cool. What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire?
So it varies obviously by function, but at the core, we're looking for people who reflect the values. Like someone who is humble, and as a result, able to put the team first, able to treat feedback as a gift. Someone who is authentic, and able to not gossip, not be political, communicate directly, and really even express their own diverse set of interests and personalities. And we say bring it all here, right? Don't be professional, be authentic. Just sort of bring your whole self. Someone who has a warrior spirit, right, is willing, striving to be the best at what they do, at whatever their function is, willing to fight for the battles that really matter at a company. And lastly,
so do you look for examples of those things? I mean, do you ask questions that specifically get at that type of behavior in their previous jobs, or how do you identify that? Because those are all obviously very good core values, but hard perhaps at times to get out in an interview situation.
Yeah, definitely there are behavioral components and sort of professional components where you're looking at work history, you're making people do little projects or answer case studies, and obviously you're limited in what you can learn in a process, but you do your best, over time to learn what a good answer is versus a bad answer and so forth.
And do you have specific questions you like to ask in terms of, getting at some of those things? I mean, I'm sure you don't interview everyone in the organization anymore. It's at one time you did, but, whether it's maybe a level or two down in the organization, what would be the kind of questions you'd ask to kind of get at some of those values?
So there are a number that have been my go-tos.
Yeah.
I almost don't want to share them, because then if I share them, then then they lose their effectiveness.
Who's ever listening to this podcast is going to know the questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing too special, but I think everyone kind of hones there's a set of questions that over time you ask over and over and over to hundreds of people, thousands of people, and as you kind of watch it play out, you learn to identify which ones gave a good signal versus a bad signal, and so on.
Do you have the kind of a flow into the organization where you can, turn more people down than you accept? You get a good pipeline full of folks and find yourself being more selective, or is it hard to find people that really match those values?
A little bit of both. Certainly. Yeah. I think there's a lot of self-selection that happens. Some people hear our values and they think, oh man, that's so great. That's just the environment for me. And other people hear them and think, oh wow, that's kind of fluffy. Like it just sounds like a bunch of soft marshmallowy stuff. Why would I want to work there? And so there's definitely that's sort of a healthy self-selection that happens. But otherwise, obviously, as the Silicon Valley recruiting environment these days is crazy, with just the amount of movement in between companies and how much funding is going into the space and all of that.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of turnover, or are you able to retain the folks that you really want to keep?
I think both. We have turnover from the perspective that stints are short in the Valley, and people jump around between companies a lot as common practice, and every one of our employees is getting reached out to, constantly with offers. And then on the other hand, we have many people who have been at the company for many many years. Some for 10 years since the very beginning. So we've got bits of both.
So we're going into the second year of the pandemic. Has that period been a good time for you? Has this been an opportunity for you guys to get deeper with your customers and for the customers themselves to see the value of 5 stars, or has it been, a harder period given the fact that you maybe haven't had as much personal contact with the customers as you like to?
It's both. So it's hard from the perspective that our customers are brick and mortar small businesses. They are the group that was the hardest hit by the pandemic,
hit the hardest, yeah.
In an effort to support them, we gave away over $1 million in credits to people who are struggling financially. We opened up a lot of our product suite to extend them for free. There was just key components of our product that they might not be able to afford to pay for, but that we thought would help. We also spent a ton of time trying to help them navigate like the government programs like PPP or EIDL if you're familiar with some of those acronyms, because they were so confusing.
Sure.
And yet, the lifeline for these businesses. So we helped hundreds of our businesses get loans and things like that. And so all of and as being directly impacted ourselves, we had to furlough portions of our own team.
Sure.
Like we had sales reps who are used to walking door to door where they couldn't do that. And so that's been really hard from that perspective. And on the other perspective, I think during this period, a lot of small businesses realize just how critical being able to interact directly with their customers is, even more than before, where they realize, hey, my best customers haven't been around in a long time, and they might not even know that I'm open now, or that I do curbside pickup now, or that I do delivery or whatever else. And if not through 5 stars, there was no other way for them to communicate to all those customers. And so we actually saw record product usage throughout this period. And we really continue to, as a lot of small businesses through this are more waking up to how important customer relationships are. That's obviously been good for the business.
Well, Victor, we're just about out of time, but we always ask one last question of all of our CEO guests. And that'd be what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone who, maybe has got their eyes on a corner office themselves, or like you, wants to be an entrepreneur?
I would say that if you have your eye on the corner office, then you're doing it all wrong. Because I think the people where their goal in life is to be, if your goal becomes, how do I climb the ladder and get the corner office, then it's going to be extremely hard for you to be the type of leader that especially today, now in this modern age, is much more expected, right? Where you are more of a servant leader. You are working for your people. You have a mission at heart. I think the advice I would give is, and further, where you've spent decades climbing the ladder just for the sake of climbing the ladder, you realize you're not passionate about any of it. And you're now having like a quarter life crisis or a midlife crisis. And that's happening more than ever before also,
That's
right? Where it used to be midlife and now you can't even get through a quarter or a third of your life before melting down and realizing you've taken the wrong path. And I can't even count how many of my personal friends were on some sort of high flying trajectory in some direction, and then you catch up with them years later and they've completely shifted jobs and industries because they realized that they were only doing it because they were chasing some sort of trophy. And on the other hand, I would say that what you should do is instead figure out what you're really passionate about. Figure out when you're 65 and you're retiring and you're talking to your kids and your grandkids, what you want to be able to tell them you accomplished. What mission are you actually passionate about? And then let that drive you. And that very well might drive you to the corner office, or at the very least, it will drive you somewhere that you actually care about, such that you're not looking in the mirror years down the road and suddenly completely surprised and upset about where you've ended up. So I think that would be my advice. If your goal is to be in the corner office, get rid of that goal.
Focus more on the journey.
And instead, think about what you actually want to create. What it is that you actually want to accomplish.
Well, Victor Ho, co-founder and CEO at Fivestars, thank you so much for sharing your career journey into the corner office.
Thanks for having me, Brant.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.